Hi yogis, welcome back to another episode of RunYogi Diaries. This is your host Santosh Shiva. I hope you had a wonderful week and you also got some time to play, swim, bike, run, whatever is your thing. Every week I bring you conversations with people who are on a journey of well-being and endurance. I hope they spark some possibility in you, leave you with some tips and perhaps some inspiration to perspire. If you like this channel, consider subscribing to it. Hit like if you like this video and leave your comments below and let us know what you think. This episode is also available on all major podcast platforms if audio is your thing. In the house today is an ultra endurance athlete who is defined by no boundaries. He is a badass ultra runner, an Ironman triathlete, and a serious mountaineer. And did I tell you he has a regular job and a family? We get behind this fascinating personal journey. How is it that while some struggle to eke out 30 minutes to stay active, some like him pursue a passion and balance it all? What makes it possible to learn new skills like swimming and climbing late in one's life? And then finally, what's next on his horizon? Let's welcome Saurabh Bhasin. Hey Saurabh, welcome to RunYogi Diaries.
Hey Santosh, glad to be here. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, absolutely, it's a pleasure. You're like the Kapil Dev of endurance sports. You do all multiple. You're into multiple disciplines, and it's a fascinating story you have from a endurance athletics perspective. So we have a lot to learn to talk to you about it. Before that, let me kind of have you do a quick personal introduction, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and share and spread all kinds of positive things that I can. So yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Saurabh, and I live in the Bay Area, California, and I've been here for about, I would say, 17 years or so. And before that, I was in New York for about 6 years. So that's just background about me. I'm in tech. And when I find time outside of work, which I actually make time for, and I'm involved in a few different activities when it comes to sports. So that's just really quickly about me. I'm sure we'll get into more details as we talk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think for the benefit of the audience, when you say I'm in a few things, I think that's an understatement. You are an ultra runner, you're a triathlon Ironman, and you're a mountaineer, you're a bicyclist. Hey, is there anything left? so, so that's amazing. um, yeah, so let's kind of jump in. Where it all started. Maybe do a put a flashback in terms of how did it all get started. I guess that was with running, right?
Yeah, it actually, well, I've always interested in staying fit. So I've always been to the gym and, try to look at, what others are doing, try to learn from it, just try to stay fit.
Mm.
But yeah, like the journey about endurance started with running, and that was somewhere 2010, 2011 time frame. That's really when I got interested in races. Not that I wanted to
Mhm.
compete, but I wanted to see what I have in terms of the ability and where I could go. So that's kind of where it started with running. And I remember it was, and maybe this is just because I'm never able to find something that I'm happy with. So I was trying a few different things, and and I tried both road running and trail running at the same time, starting with 10Ks and 5Ks and those kinds of things, and then also started with very humble distances like 5 miles on the trail, and and that's kind of where it all started. And I remember
Mhm.
I would drive, an hour to go run 5 mile race. And, now it seems a little bit ridiculous, but that's how excited I was when I was beginning. I would drive anywhere where there was a race so that I could get that excitement of, running with people,
Yeah.
the thrill of, crossing the finish line, trying to improve a time that I thought I couldn't do. So yeah, that's kind of like how it all started. Um, and
So
then, just
have you been growing up? up, have you been very an active individual, or was this something that it evolved later in your life? Or
Um, well, so I grew up to high school. I was in India, so it was the usual kind of activities that kids are involved in.
Mm,
I didn't really have a ton of exposure, but I tried my hand at like swimming for a year. I tried my hand at cricket for a little bit here and there. Just trying to be
yeah,
active in school, but there wasn't any kind of sport
yeah,
particularly that I gravitated towards or that I found excitement around. And from that perspective, I kind of tried everything and I didn't really do anything. So I wasn't known for my athletic ability. Not that I'm known for athletic ability now, but definitely not growing up. I was just another kid, and I think a lot of focus on academics, a lot of focus on you know
mhm,
um, doing well. I guess that's a very
yeah,
subjective term. Doing well could be
yeah,
so many things, but back in the day, doing well meant one thing, which is academics.
yeah, yeah. That's the typical South Asian experience, right? For
I hope that
and
changes. I hope
yeah,
that changes, and I think it's taken a while, but I see that with kind of the how we performed at the Olympics and
mm,
how the exposure that people get now as younger adults and kids growing up.
yeah,
That is amazing. I wish I had that exposure to different kinds of activities. I see people in India being exposed to running at a large scale or being
mm,
exposed to cycling or triathlons, hiking, climbing,
yep,
you name it. And I just didn't have that awareness. I just didn't know that there was that world. So, a lot of this was me coming here and even in the early part of, going to school over here. Again, there was always that desire, but that
mm,
exposure was for me to like oh, there's these things, there is this world, there is this community. So I discovered a lot of this on my own, just um, being curious, I suppose.
yep, yep. So you got into running, which is you could have started anywhere. Was there a particular reason you got into running? Why did you choose running? Was it friends? Was it some other influence, or somebody inspired you to do that? Or
um, I don't think there's a specific moment that I can pinpoint
mm,
to, but I think the origin was is a mix of few things. One was as I was wrapping up my 20s, I
mm,
was I was finding myself looking very different than what I was, and I said, well, I need to look better, and
mm,
you can say aesthetics was one driver, how I
mm,
want to look, which seems shallow, but it certainly was at that point one thing that I cared about, and the second thing was I'd also tried a few times to quit smoking, and for me the there's all these things that could be used as aids, but running was a mental aid for me to
mm,
like that was the strongest tool I had, not the gum or the patch or like all the other tools
yeah,
that people try. So yeah, it was mostly just to see like what I'm made of,
yeah,
and that was the main thing. And of course, as you start, you start seeing improvements, you start seeing things change, how you feel, how you
yeah,
look, how you perform, and all of those things are positive feedback into
mhm,
doing more. So
yeah,
so yeah, it was a combination of things, but I think I just wanted a different lifestyle when I was
mhm,
starting my 30s, and that's basically the start of running. Like I mentioned, I was still going to the gym in my 20s, but it wasn't with the purpose. It was just like, okay, I got an hour in the evening, so let's go like lift
yeah,
some weights.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. And you've done phenomenal in the way you've kind of scaled your running journey, right? A lot of people have started running, and they've gone on to do half marathons, and pretty much that's been it. But you have
Mhm.
taken it and uh, built an amazing body of work, including doing I saw close to 40 plus ultra runs, 100 milers, 200 milers, as well as marathon. So how did that happen? I mean, is it something, are you like that always, like you always want to keep pushing limits, or is it something that running got you to do?
I think I'm like that as a person, which is to see what's next. Um,
Mm.
I'm always happy with what I have, but I want more, and I think that applies to many things, in a good way or a bad way. I don't know, but that's how who I am. So
Mhm.
as you mentioned, I started out with simple things like 5Ks and 5 miles and 10Ks and those distances, and for me, I wanted to see, what's the next level. Like, what is
Mm.
everybody else doing, and I get my inspiration from looking at all the extraordinary stuff that people are doing around me, whether
Mm.
it's a friend, whether it's somebody that I've just heard of, like an acquaintance, or whether it's an elite athlete that I just see on the TV. So,
Right.
I just look at all of these folks as inspiration. And what I've done is I've looked at them, and and I've probably spent countless hours looking at YouTube when people are doing amazing things, and I've used that as a way to say, okay, I know this is outside of my ability right now, but I know that I can get there. I can see a path,
Mhm.
and that's how I start with things. I kind of visualize this target, and I try to take steps. And a lot
Mhm.
of times, the path to getting there is trial and error. Sometimes you have mentors along the way. Sometimes you pick up tips along the way, but a lot of times it's just hard work. You just keep showing up, and
Yeah.
then I tried a half marathon. And I just one thing to mention is that as you scale up the distances, it doesn't mean that half marathons are easy
Mhm.
or a 5K is easy, right?
Yep.
You can still race a 5K hard even after you've done longer distances, and they're
Yep.
just very different things. But from a progression perspective, I wanted to see, can I go further. I tried to go faster, but at
Mhm.
some point I think I don't have that in me. so
Right.
so I'm not like a particularly fast guy, but I figured that I could go longer. So that's why that was the vector, that was the direction that I just kept pushing. Then there was there's obviously the next step of, well, marathon is this thing that everybody does,
Mhm.
and people around me have done marathons, so maybe I could try one. And you try one, then you want to do another one, then you hear about, like, oh, there's one in Chicago, there's one in San Francisco, there's one in this city, there's one in Napa. So then you want to like use that as a way to go check out new places,
Right.
explore cities. I went to Florence, and I combined a vacation and a marathon.
Mhm.
And not that I did great in the marathon, but it was a great way to see a city.
Mhm.
So you just kind of like take the next step, and once you kind of get into the point of, okay, now it's getting repetitive, then to me is like, what else is everybody doing?
Yeah.
And then I discovered trails, and so on and so forth. But that's kind of the progression, is just always looking at, is there something else I could be doing?
Mhm.
Now there's a lot of people who will say, I'm going to look at a marathon and I'm going to specialize in it, and I'm going
Mhm.
to just keep perfecting it. And that's a great pursuit. But that's something that I couldn't do, because after a while, like, speed work was just not for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so absolutely, that's great. Those are great, great principles. If you can give us some examples, like for example, traditionally when you talk to an ultra runner,
Hmm.
there's a progression. You start with the 50K, the baby ultras, and then
Hmm.
there's a 50 mile, there's a 100 mile. Now you've reached to a point where you're doing 200 milers, right?
Hmm.
So uh, which of them have been defining for you? I mean, is it the distance,
Okay.
or is it in what way? So give us some specific, you know uh, give us some
Yeah.
specific anecdotes on how that happened in your case.
Um, I think I probably followed a path which is similar to others, starting from 50Ks.
Mm.
I know a lot of people nowadays are, they'll start with a 50K, maybe a 50 miler, and then they'll dream big, which is great. For me, I actually was maybe scared. I wanted to take the steps, the small steps. So I think the first kind of race where I felt that I did well, and I could call myself an ultramarathoner was when I did really well in the North Face 50 miler in San Francisco, or north of San
Mhm.
Francisco. Um, I've done that race I think 2 or 3 times, and the second time when I did that race, I felt that the execution was where it kind of like all came together.
Mhm.
I figured out how you would fuel in a race. I figured out
Mhm.
how you would optimize your time spent at an aid station. So all of that, and I went into that race not scared, but ready
Mhm.
and anticipating that it will go well. Now, so I would say like that was kind of the moment where I said, okay, I think I'm ready to upgrade and go to a bigger distance. So I think the North Face 50 miler was that, and the reason why I picked that race is it's traditionally been a tough 50 miler.
Mhm.
So that was inspiring, and it introduced like a lot of confidence in me. So that's kind of the stage where I think I said, okay, I can do more. And in the
So
ultra
can you
community,
talk the sorry, but can you talk to that couple of points you said? You said one is you learned nutrition.
hmm
That was one point you made, and you
hmm
also talked about pacing. I think those are
yeah,
some of the things that. So, is there some nuggets of wisdom you want to pass on to our viewers here in terms of what
yeah,
worked for
yeah.
you? What have you learned?
Actually, the thing that I've learned is that nutrition is so individual specific. It's
Mm,
so unique to yourself. While I had a coach where we talked about, balance these kinds of things, or take this gel or try that other thing. At the end of the day, what really nutrition means is you go out there and you try it on a long run. And I've had days when I'm, on the trail, throwing up, cramping, you name it. And
mhm,
I think everybody kind of that wants to wants to keep progressing has to go through these learning experiences. Not that everybody's
mhm,
going to throw up, but you go through these experiences to learn. So for me, it was, I tried homemade food, I tried gels, I tried solid nutrition, liquid nutrition, a combination of these things. I tried no nutrition for some time. I tried fasted runs. I tried, breakfast in the morning. So there's so much that you can try. And there was days when, you things would work out, and you would write it. Like, so what I would say is, with nutrition specifically, don't be afraid to experiment and do it in advance of your races. That's the key. And it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to have cramps, but figure out what's going on, change something, take a little bit more salt. Don't, like, for me, turned out I was taking too much salt.
okay.
So these are the things that I learned along the way. Um, you know, a lot of people, for example, love Tailwind. Didn't work for me.
Mhm,
So I would say, you know, while people will tell you a lot of things that work for them,
mhm.
take that information, try it, keep a log, keep a journal, whatever, like, digital, physical, and when it starts working, try to repeat it
Mhm.
and make small changes. And it just doesn't apply to nutrition. It applies to things like your clothing, the time of the day you run, the shoes, the socks. And the reason why I'm being so precise is that I think in ultra running you can probably get away with it, but in triathlons you have to dial these things in. So that's where kind of like it came in, because as I was progressing in ultra running, I was also interested in other things like triathlons. So I was juggling multiple sports in once, and I was applying these learnings across the board.
Right. Makes sense. So it seems like in your case, and those are great tips. You don't want to be very prescriptive of a particular approach. Seems like what you're saying is, hey, try different things. There are these different schools of thoughts out there, schools of nutrition out there. Everyone is going to have an opinion, but you got to try it on yourself during your training, and whatever clicks for you is what, I guess, you carry forward. There's really no one answer or one size that
There
fits all,
isn't.
right?
I know people who are ultra runners who'll eat, you know, biryani and khichdi, like Indian food, and
Hmm.
and they do great.
Hmm.
There are people who just cannot stomach that. I know people
Yeah,
who
yeah.
eat laddus for runs, like
Hmm.
for all the people that know what laddus are, to your audience. But then there is people who cannot eat either spicy or food, um, um, like real food. Then
Yeah.
people just rely on gels. So for example, when I started out, I was, and I still kind of rely on mostly gels and sport nutrition kind of food.
Hmm.
But as you get into longer distances, you realize that you need, a good bit of fat. You need some protein because you're out there for a day, two,
Hmm.
3, 4, 5 days. So, for example, if you aspire to do a half marathon, probably a couple of gels is fine. You don't need to
Yeah.
experiment that much. I think there's a lot of success, a
Yeah.
well-defined path for these things. But when you're out there experimenting things, when you're out there for like 5 or 6 hours, that's on the fringe of like what people are, when people are learning new things. And my only message right now is that it's okay to cramp. It's okay to throw up. It's okay to
Hmm.
you know feel like crap and want to cut things short, but take something away from it.
Hmm.
And yeah, I seeked everybody. Like I asked all my friends, hey, I'm throwing up, like what do you do? Like tell me what you do. And I read about it. I watched a lot of videos. So my only thing is, if we were talking maybe 20 years ago,
Hmm.
there's probably very few approaches. I would have said, yeah, take a salt pill every hour and take a gel every 30 minutes, and that's all it would have been.
Right.
But it's not that straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a paradox of choice now.
It's a good thing
It's
that we have a lot of choice. It's a good thing.
yeah.
But with that, I think you kind of have to find what works for you.
Yeah.
I'll give you an interesting thing that I found that works for me as a pre-race breakfast.
Hmm.
After trying, everything,
Hmm.
I tried oatmeal, I tried PBJs, I tried, you name it. Like I've tried the traditional breakfast. But what really works for me is, those uh, the cup of noodles,
Hmm.
the ones that you microwave. So I'll have one or two of those carbs, sodium,
Hmm.
works really well.
Hmm.
Another thing that used to work really well for me for long runs was I'll have a couple of kulfis that I'd buy from the store
Hmm.
before the long run, and that's again, it's you have to experiment, and that's the
Yeah.
joy, right? Like I'm out there to enjoy things. So if I enjoy a kulfi before a run, why not?
Yeah. No, no, makes totally sense. That's great tip. Those are great. A lot of gold in what you just shared, because in a lot of people who are in the middle or in the early part of their journey, there's a lot of anxiety around these topics, right? And I think to
Hmm.
your point, experiment, try out, and see what fits
Jump
you
in,
is the right. Yeah, there's a right. That's a
start,
great.
right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, my message to anybody is start, take the
Yeah,
first step, take the show up every day, and you're going to learn. Like you don't,
yeah,
while it's good to have inspiration, while it's good to have mentors, but you learn just by showing up.
yeah, yeah. So now coming back to your journey, you're in 50 miles. You kind of seem to have
Hmm.
figured that out, and you said you're ready for your next big step. So
Hmm.
then what happened? You just signed up for the next available 100 miler out there.
No, I think what happens is that once you kind of start flirting with the 50-mile distance, then you kind of hear about this other world of 100 milers, and then you hear about these iconic races like the Western States,
Mhm.
Hard Rock, etc. And then you're like, okay, well, let me look into how do you get into one of these races. And then you're like, okay, well, you need to qualify. So you need to do these other races to qualify. So then you kind of just going down this like, slippery slope of signing up for races to get into other races. So,
Okay, that explains
so,
it.
so I looked up what was the most logical way to go get a lottery ticket for Western States. And for
Mhm.
me, there's a great race which is in the Bay Area. It's actually a pretty iconic race. It's called the Quicksilver,
Hmm.
and I think pretty much everybody in the Bay Area has to go graduate through that race. It's this path that you have to take. So I did the Quicksilver 100K, and the 100K, it's in the Quicksilver Park. It's usually around, I think, May when I did it, and now with the pandemic they've shifted it around. But in May, it's a hot race,
And
and
what year was this? Where are we in terms of the year?
mm, probably 2015 or 2016. I would
Hmm.
have to look.
That's fine. Yeah,
It's yeah,
approximately in the time scale. Yeah.
yeah. So for the first like number of years, I was doing marathons and
Hmm.
primarily on the road,
Yeah.
and then I started doing trail runs, but then I went to 50Ks, and then yeah.
Hmm.
So I looked at Quicksilver. I signed up back in the day. I think it wasn't as crazy to get in. Nowadays, it is a lottery, I believe. So I got into that race, and I think if you finish in a certain amount of time, you get the ability to apply for Western states.
Hmm.
So I finished in whatever was required. And then I put my name in the hat for Western states. You have to be extremely lucky to get in your first shot.
Hmm.
Not everybody does. Most people don't. And then from that point on, you're like, okay, well, I need another qualifier next year. So what am I going
Hmm.
to do? And then you kind of look around. You go to Ultra Sign Up, and you go from the 50-mile filter to the 200-mile filter, and then you find what else is out there. So the next one was Rio del Lago in the Folsom, Sacramento, that area, and
Hmm.
that's another local race. I say local, but it's in this region. It's one of those races that most people go towards as their first 100 miler. People call it a flat or an easy first 100 miler. I think every 100 miler is has to be respected, no matter like what you consider
Hmm.
flat or hilly. So that's kind of the progression. Then I signed up for that one, and that was my first 100 miler. So
And what
and
happened to
then
the Western states? Did you get into the Western states at all after that?
I still haven't.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm on this like spiral of keep signing up for races to try to get into that one, um, and hopefully someday I'll get in. But if
Hmm.
not, there's a lot of people who consider doing this in a fat ass style, and fat ass
Hmm.
basically just means that you and your 7 friends get together and you go run it yourself with
Hmm.
minimal support or some support from your friends and family, etc. So we'll see where it goes, but right now I'm in the process of just exploring cool races, and if they check the box of being a qualifier,
Yeah.
then it's great. So that was Rio del Lago. Then I did another 100 mile in Oregon. It's called Mountain Lakes. Beautiful race. If
Hmm.
people want to explore that area, it's Mountain Lakes 100. It's hard to get into, but if you're on the wait list, you likely will get in. So yeah, I just kept signing up for races. That's
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
how it all went.
Yeah.
And as you're doing these races, then you have to do your long runs.
Hmm.
Sometimes you do it on your own. Sometimes you're like, oh, I could probably do a 50 miler to substitute for a long run, or I could do a
Yeah.
50K. So that's how I did a lot of races, was as training runs, because it's just convenient. You have to carry less stuff. You have support along the way. You have people that are running with you.
Yeah.
So local races are a great way to use as a step to your training towards something bigger, and it
Yeah.
supports the local community. It brings people together. So I love local races. They're great.
Yeah. Perfect. Beautiful. That explains to the audience what I call as the whirlpool of ultras, right? This
You
is how it
just
happens.
get sucked in.
It just gets sucked in, and the Western states is a big culprit, like what you said. Seems like it probably. I
Yeah,
mean,
because you
looking
try
this
to
up.
get in, right? You're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, okay,
So you
not this year. Let me try next year. And then there's like, I think by the seventh or eighth year, you get a lot of tickets, so you likely will get in. So
Hmm.
it's a great business model, right? You're in for at least 8 years.
8 years, yeah. So, like you said, you just have to show up and start, and the rest of it will be taken care of by the whirlpool.
I know, right? I didn't know. I didn't like when I was doing my first race. I didn't know what Western States was. I didn't know what 100 miles was. I didn't know what trail shoes were. I didn't know what gaiters were. I didn't know what a hydration pack was. But
Yeah.
you show up and then somebody's got like, this thing on their back, they're sipping water from it. I'm like, dude, it's better than carrying 2 bottles of stuff in my
Yeah,
hand.
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
how you learn, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, awesome, beautiful. And I think if you are someone who has the inclination to continue to grow, to explore, be curious, like you said,
Hmm.
that it's a perfect storm, right? Because there's so much out there, and it's a good way because it's also making you a better version of yourself every time you keep pushing yourself. So
And I think
it's a
it's in
win-win.
every sport. It's in every sport.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, my wife, you know, she wanted to do one marathon. She was very specific.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to do one marathon within a year of our son being born, and she did that. She accomplished that goal. And for her, success is just working out every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? So she works out, she lifts, she's in great shape, and that's her progression, and that's like she's always like finding ways to grow there. So I think it applies to every sport where you
Mm-hmm.
have to you have to define like what growth means to you, and I think most people want to see themselves doing well,
Yep.
and you're your biggest fan, man. That's my opinion.
That's a good tagline. Be your biggest fan. It's awesome. That's a great tagline, by the way. You got to patent that.
Well, I think that I kind of joke, but what I mean by that is you have to be happy.
Yeah,
You have
yeah,
to you have to be satisfied, and if you're not, then you could probably yeah. I guess that's I don't know what else the counter of that
yeah,
is, but
yeah.
you have to be happy. That's it.
Absolutely. So you spoke about family and wife. So how do you make sure that with this level of commitment you have in the
Hmm.
ultras and other areas of endurance sports, you're able to balance that? How do you do that?
I think in the early days, I was probably like very heavily focused on my own training,
Mm,
and if I had to do it again, I would probably do it differently, where I would balance it out a little bit more. Now where I am, I have realized that it's more than me, and maybe I was slow to
mhm,
realize. But what I would say is that uh, figuring it out and communicating, hey, this is what my plan is for today. This is what I would like to achieve as a goal or a long term thing.
yeah.
If you communicate and if you find a way to work your schedule out together, I think that is important to succeed.
Mhm,
And then you make time for each other's activities and goals. So for example, our usual conversation is like, hey, what's your workout plan for today?
mhm,
When do you plan to work out? When do I plan to work out? And then we'll be like, okay, fine, you go first, or I'll go first, or you go in the morning, I'll go in the evening.
yeah.
It's an ongoing conversation. And then any kind of big trips, you kind of just talk about it. Hey, this is what I'm thinking about in September
Mhm,
or next year or in the next 5 years. So uh, so I would say communication and being able to support each other, and all of that is then followed by execution. So you
yeah.
kind of you have to carve out time in your day. So sometimes you're not like up for like getting changed and stepping out. You're feeling lazy, like everybody's a human being. Sometimes you just don't feel like doing something. You just want to sit. But you know that you have to do it because there's other parts of life that have to follow around
Mhm,
it. Like you might have to go somewhere. You might have to you know take care of things in the house. You like chores, etc. So I think with a family and a kid and other commitments like work, etc., you have to be structured if you
mhm,
want to do this. You have to
mhm,
be specific. You have to be deliberate. So one of the things that I've been doing for years is even on my work calendar, I'll block out time for workout. I may not
mhm,
work out at that time, but that is my time that is blocked off. No meetings, and it's usually like 5:30 in the morning, so there's no meetings there anyway.
yeah,
But that is a reminder for me that I'm going to do this.
yeah.
Now I'm going to sometimes cheat and say, fine, not in the morning, I'll do it in the evening,
Mhm,
but I'm going to do it. So being deliberate about it, and with the family, just communicating,
yeah,
supporting, like, and I don't think I'm sharing anything that's new. That's the key to success, I think.
yeah. No, that's well
Yeah.
said. Well said. I think there's a lot of gold. I think key takeaway is be structured. That's a great, very important.
Accountable, right, to yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And also, I think when I say structured, just putting a certain being organized, so you are able to communicate to yourself and others. And
Hmm.
like you said, carving out certain times in the day, just blocking it out. Those are important things because a lot of people have that question, right? Especially people who have not done the kind of stuff that you've done. um, how do I manage juggle so many things, right? And I think the answer down comes down to being deliberate, like you said, being having a structure, being
Hmm.
organized. That is very important.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
you have to. There was times when I remember. You could be, you could be, you could be doing something on a Friday night, or like for example, me, like I would go to the pool because I had to go do my swim.
mhm,
Right? It's not going to happen if you don't go.
mhm,
So there was times when you know with a young baby in the early days, everybody's gone to bed, but you still have to go out and do your run at
mhm,
8, 9 p.m., whatever it is, right? So, and I see this in other athletes, right? Are people who have a goal in mind, they will make time,
mhm. Yep.
and you have to make time. Um, you know, maybe let's say you're beginning now, right? If you if you consolidate two things, like if you're watching TV, maybe you have a treadmill, or if
Mhm.
you want to like watch a show on Netflix, combine those two activities, right?
Yeah.
Walk and watch, listen to an audiobook instead of actual physical book, and go out for a
Mhm.
walk. And those kinds of small things will turn into big things,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
so so that
Yeah.
you
Makes
have you
sense.
have you have to keep showing up.
Yeah, in fact, that's one thing that was also there's a book called Atomic Habits, and that's exactly what the author suggests over there. It is to combine activities to start
Hmm.
new habits, right? So those are great
Hmm.
tips.
Okay.
And kind of moving forward in your own journey, I know you've been doing things in parallel, but
Hmm.
you also mentioned swimming, and you
Hmm.
seem to have also conquered the world of Ironman triathlon, right? Not Yeah,
Not
so
conquered. I'm an
conquered as in
I'm
you
I'm an
conquered the
amateur
ocean.
athlete.
Yeah, of course. We are speaking all of this within the constraints of being a recreational athlete. Um, but the point is that a lot of people have fear of competing in the water or
Hmm.
open water swimming, and that stops them pursuing
Hmm.
triathlon. But you
Hmm.
seem to have also added that to your bag of tricks. So how do you do that? How do you keep yourself
Hmm.
motivated to keep learning and pushing your limits even in areas that are not comfortable? I mean, you could have always said, hey, I'm doing great in ultras, I'm pushing limits, I'm doing 100 milers. Why should I bother with learning something uncomfortable as swimming and go, you know, into the triathlon world?
Yeah, I think something we spoke about earlier, which was there's this community, there's friends, people you see, people you know of, and somebody takes that first step, and
Hmm.
you're like, wow, let me go look into this. Then 6 hours later, you've watched a lot of videos on YouTube, and you're like,
Hmm.
that looks really cool. And it's finding those sparks for me has always been a way to get sucked into this some new thing. And a lot of
Hmm.
times it's like just I'm just looking at this, and I cannot believe, like, people are doing these kinds of things.
Yeah.
So then, step number one, curiosity, that kicks in, and I'm like, okay, let me look into this, and that's kind of how it started with Ironman.
Hmm.
And when I looked at it, it was daunting.
Hmm.
The distances and the commitment to train for it was daunting. But then, when you see the video of somebody crossing a finish line,
Hmm.
you don't know that person, you don't know what they went through, but you feel like you're there, you feel so excited. And those videos started that fire for me, where I said, okay, look, there's people out there of different ages, different sizes, different shapes. They are doing this, and what that tells me is there is a path to get there.
Mhm.
I don't know that, but I can figure it out,
Mhm.
right? And like, okay, fine. Find a website, sign up for a race.
Yeah.
Shit, now you paid money for it. Now you're going to do it. uh, so, coming back to it, when you have that inspiration, when you kind of feel driven, then for me, it's like, okay, let's do an inventory of what you don't know.
Mhm.
And swimming was one of those things where I tried my hand at it, as a younger kid, but nothing formal. And it goes back to
Mhm.
the exposure of back in the day versus now. I think
Mhm.
there's certainly people who have been swimming in India for a while, but
Yeah.
I would say that's not common. So I figured out, like, okay, what do I need to do? I started going to the local community pool and just
Mhm.
trying things. Um, I didn't go seek out anything, but then once you plateau a little bit, then you figure out, okay, I'm swimming, let's say, a lap, which
Mhm.
was an accomplishment.
Mhm.
Just go from one end of the pool to another end of the pool and not drown. And then you're like, okay, fine. I think I got a few things down, but long way to go. Then you go from one end and come back,
Mhm.
and then you come back and you study a little bit more. You watch technique videos. You
Mhm.
you see what other people are doing. And then I figured out there's this like analysis that people can do where they can take a look at your video and they can give you some advice or tips, or you pay them $100 or whatever it was at that point,
Mhm.
and they say, like, you got to do this, you got to do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So then from that point on, you're like, okay, what's the next plateau? And at that point, I figured I should probably get an instruction in person,
Mhm.
where I don't want to commit to something for a longer term, but I can go to the pool, 3, 4 times, and somebody can give me, the next kind of level of tricks to unlock whatever the next plateau is.
Right.
So I tried that, and then along the way, you kind of take those things and you practice it. So you
Mhm.
know apply it, and and you have to show up. Like, you have to show up to the pool. If you're a recreational swimmer, like once a week is great, or twice a week is great. But if you're going to get into, wanting to do a triathlon, then you have to commit to 3 or 4 times. I would say four
Mhm.
times is where it starts to click.
Mhm.
And you don't have to do it every week, but you have to show up. So that was kind of the progression. And I started from zero. I started
Mhm.
from being scared of the water. And
Mhm.
even when I was comfortable in the pool, going from the pool to open water, that was another huge step.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to open water alone because I just didn't know, like, what happens, if you're not feeling that great. What kind of support do you have? How can you bail? So luckily, in the Bay Area, there's a few different groups. One of them I remember clearly is called Swim with Pedro. Maybe it's got a different name now. And what they would do is, like, they would charge you like $5 or $10, and they would get people together with beginner abilities, and they basically have a couple of people on kayaks, but all they
Mhm.
did was, like, they were just there to make you feel
Mhm.
comfortable.
Mhm.
They didn't teach you swimming.
Yeah.
All they did was, like, they were like, we're here if something goes wrong. I don't know what they would
Yeah.
do if something
Yeah.
goes wrong, but just knowing that somebody is watching out for
Yeah.
you was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think they help you a little bit here and there, like, they'll tell you what to do. So that was I did a few of those sessions where I would go up like every Sunday to San Francisco, and I did swim in open water there. And then you kind of feel comfortable. And then you find another buddy who's doing this. Like, hey, let's you and I go,
Yeah.
or find another buddy. So you kind of um, feel you feel more comfortable in your
Yeah.
abilities and what you've learned. And open water is, I would say, it's so much more enjoyable than swimming in the pool.
Mhm.
Even though it sounds scary, it's kind of like running outdoor versus running on the treadmill.
Mhm.
Once you get comfortable in the open water, which can take a while, it's more enjoyable. I love swimming in a river. I love swimming in a lake. Oceans, it varies, but lakes and rivers are my favorite.
Right.
And if I lived next to a lake or a river, I would probably swim a lot, but you know, it's it's yeah. With open water swimming, you just have to trust that you'll like it and
Yeah.
it'll feel good. I know people have this fear of like the unknown, like you don't know what's down there, and one thing I'll say, which I didn't know the time, is trust your wetsuit. The wetsuit that you're swimming in is buoyant.
Hmm.
You cannot drown in it. You'll certainly float. You will, and if you're tired, take a break.
Yeah.
You'll float. Just float. You don't have to keep going. If you want to just take a break. There
Yeah.
was times, if I had a long swim, hour and a half, I would actually stuff a gel in my sleeve of the wetsuit. I would go
Hmm.
like 45 minutes, just float, enjoy a gel in the middle of a lake. So, so just it's okay. It's okay to take a break. You're not.
Yeah.
You know, Again, you have to know, like, you're doing it for fun. You're doing to learn
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Amazing. And then you have done a few Ironmans subsequently, correct? During that part.
yeah, yeah, I've done 5. Yeah.
Nice. That's amazing. So that's a great takeaway, sort of, which is because also there's a lot of science, especially behind the brain science, right? Where there's enough science that supports the fact that if you're learning new skills, you're creating new neural networks, you're
Hmm.
keeping your brain fresh. It's not just about the body. What we're doing in endurance sports is not just about the body; it's also about brain development. And when you're learning these new skills, you are actually kicking off new neural networks. You're getting staying young in a way in the level of your mind, right?
People say triathlon is, and I don't disagree that it's a commitment. But the reason why it's fun is because it keeps you engaged in many different
Mm,
ways.
yeah.
In fact, I used to look forward to the swims starting from zero, because
Mm,
swims were a great recovery from
mhm,
trashing your legs on the run, or going out for a 6-hour ride. Like, the swim was actually, getting into a nice cold pool. It
mm,
felt like a 45-minute ice bath when you're just
yeah.
like
Yeah.
swimming, relaxed pace. So it was always stimulating. It was always
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
physically and mentally stimulating. Yeah.
Yeah. So, guys, you can learn swimming. It's a great sport. I agree with you. I've just been doing that lately. Last few
Hmm.
2 to 3 months, I've been trying to get my swimming up a little bit in terms of efficiencies, and I completely agree with you. It's very refreshing. It feels good to learn another skill, and be water especially, right? So
Yeah, and if people are learning, one of the things that I realized was that sometimes you have to slow down to go
mhm,
faster, and
mhm,
that applied in swimming. I realized the reason why I was going, a couple of laps and getting tired was because I was just going out too fast.
mhm, mhm,
And one of the tools that I learned about was, it's called a tempo trainer. It's like a metronome for swimming.
mhm.
And what you do is you take that, you put it in your swim cap, and you set a cadence. So I would set it to like
Okay.
180 or something, and it just beeps. I mean, it's probably annoying for some people to like just hear a beep for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever your swim duration is. But
Okay.
what that helped me, let's say, if you want to just try for 15 minutes, is every time it beeps, you take a stroke. Every time it beeps, you
Mhm,
take a stroke.
mhm,
And it it is training your mind
mhm.
to be at a specific cadence. And once I actually figured out what my cadence was, I I can I could swim for like 4 or 5 thousand yards, no problem. Like, just be meditating in the water
Mhm,
without any breaks. 90 minutes, 2 hours, I could swim continuously.
awesome. No, that's good. That's a good takeaway as well. Awesome. So, so we are here. We are you've kind of entered the world of triathlons. You've conquered that arena, and then the big one that's happening right now, which is what's on your T-shirt, the 8848. Let's talk about that. Mountaineering, right? So, when did that enter your think space?
Um, I think my love for mountains started with the early days of trail running.
Mm,
I kind of didn't realize that that's what it was, but I think what attracts me to trails is how raw and rigid, rough and rugged they are. and that it is it is always challenging you. Like no matter how many times you do a hill, you're always um, you're always challenged by it in different ways. So that's kind of where it started. Was like I was always chasing mountains. I always wanted to be in the mountains, and it's a great way to stay in shape from a trail running perspective. But then what I started doing was, and again, this is one of those things, curiosity. What are other people doing? In terms of trail running and especially ultra running. And when you realize that you can run this long or this far, then it unlocks these routes and opportunities that others are doing. So, for example, I know people who are going and running in Yosemite because you found a friend or somebody on Strava. At that time, Strava was relatively new, but you saw somebody do like a 20-mile loop in Yosemite, and that's beautiful area, lots of big mountains there, and you're like, okay, I think that's a good one. I'm going to save this. Let me think about it. So for me, kind of like the step one was I saw somebody do Mount Whitney, and I think I was probably like naive or probably just stupid, where people take like 2 or 3 days to do 14ers. I was like, look, I'm going to do this in a day. um, so I just went out with a few friends and said, look, we'll start early. We'll camp at we'll camp at the trailhead for a few days, so we kind of get acclimatized, and then we kind of just go for it. And so that's what we did. Like we did Mount Whitney about 9 hours, and that's about a 21, 22-mile round trip, going from 8,000 feet to 14,000 feet, 14 and a half, and it felt great. And that was this moment of a realization that if you plan things and if you have the ability and the training, you can actually achieve some of these bigger objectives. And I went back and did Whitney again in like 6.5, 7 hours, where did an improvement. And then this whole world of the Sierra opened up for me, where it's such a massive range in California, um, on the eastern side. So I would just look at maps, and I would just drool at these mountains and say, okay, you know what, that looks like a good route. Let me try to connect this one, connect that one, and I would just try to go there as much as possible. So I'd go and, for example, leave on a Friday night, go sleep at the trailhead for a few hours, and then try to hit this like big peak. And I did that with, for example, Mount Agassiz in the Palisades range. And then you kind of just like start exploring, and a lot of times how I explored things was I would either look at somebody's activity because somebody else did it, or I would just look at an area of a map and like, okay, is there a trail there? Do people go there? And then I would look it up. So that's kind of how it all started. Then I went to Shasta, which is the northern part of California. It's one of the most southern volcanoes in the Cascades, and it's heavily glaciated. But what that did for me was it opened up this world of trail running plus mountaineering, where it's not just sufficient that you have endurance and the ability to just stay out for a long time and cover long distances, but you also need some skill of how to traverse on a different surface than just trail. So when that was happening, I I started looking into, well, how do you get started with this stuff? How do you learn? And and at that time there was a Sierra Mountaineering Club, and they would, for a very minimal fee, you could just join and go on like these trips with them. In the early days, the trips were free, and you would pay for some seminars and some online classes and stuff like that. So I did all of those classes. I went for a couple of trips to learn some skills. Um, and then you kind of feel a little bit more confident. Then you try a little bit of a bigger objective. So that's kind of how it all started. And at that time, the being able to climb a 14,000 foot mountain, because in the US, in the continental US, in 48 states, 14,000 ish are basically like the high mountains.
Mhm.
Now, if you go to Alaska, you have bigger mountains, but in the continental US, 14,000 is where, like, the California, Colorado, Washington, basically, like, all the mountains are in that range. And that was for a while, like, like, let's see if I can, like, try to climb all these 14ers. And I did a bunch in the Sierra, Shasta, and then most recently I was actually the first time I went to Colorado for climbing a 14er. So there's a lot of, like, cool stuff, and that's kind of the natural progression that I think, if
Mhm.
people explore this world, people quickly want to get to 14ers, because
Mhm.
it's basically like what people talk about. Like, it's people people consider that success, like, climbing a 14er of different kinds and different skills and different routes and different um, times of the year. So those are the things that people kind of mix and match, and then uh, take it to the next level.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how it all started for me. Shasta is where, I stepped into um, the world of, like, climbing on a glacier and experimenting that. I'd done a little bit of that, but not on a big 14,000 foot mountain. And the first time I went to Shasta, I had to actually turn around at 11,000 feet because of bad weather and extremely warm conditions. But the second time I made it. So yeah, that's kind of how it all started.
Mhm.
Trying to um, try to do 14. And again, it was mostly because I was looking around. Like,
Yeah.
all these people are trying these things, and to me that's like, okay, great.
Yeah.
I see that as an objective, and I just need to create, like, my roadmap towards it.
Yeah. Yeah. Clearly. So, skills, you talked about skills, right? In mountaineering
Hmm.
specifically.
Hmm.
Did you have to go, did you get yourself educated specifically around
Yeah,
these skills somewhere? Mhm.
yeah, and I think, even these days, if people reach out to me, and I recommend, not recommend, I strongly suggest that people take an intro to mountaineering class. And if you just look it up online, there's a
Mhm.
lot of great organizations that offer intro to mountaineering and intro to skills classes.
Mhm.
A lot of times, what companies do with a guide service, they'll combine a climb with a skills class.
Okay.
So, for example, um, a good one, for example, is, Rainier. A lot of times, companies will say, if you want to climb Mount Rainier in Washington, you could do it in about 2 days. But a lot of times they'll say, we'll make it a 3 or a 4 day thing,
Mhm.
where the first day is a little bit easy. You get to camp, you set up camp. The next day is all skills. They cover, self arrest, um, crampon skills. How do you ascend in crampons? How do you use your ice axe? How do you use, the basics of knots and snow camping? The principles of leave no trace and wilderness safety. So, they cover a lot of these things. But what I'll say is, so actually, before we get into that, from that point, they then transition into the actual climb. If everything goes well, you summit and you come back. So it's a good combination, because you kind of get this, like, prize at the end, and you learn skills. So
Right.
that's a good way to, like, enter into this. But also, sometimes people just do, like, skills classes, or you can do, like, if you go to Tahoe or Yosemite, or basically any place with mountains, you can do, like, a half day skills class. You don't have
Mhm.
to do a major 3 4 day climb. um, when I started, a lot of these seminars were even online.
Mhm.
I would listen into a seminar where they would talk about, this is what a glacier means, this is what a couloir means, this is what, you know um, a saddle means, like, different features of a mountain, like, how do you get familiarize yourself. So a lot of these things, and nowadays you don't even have to take a seminar, you just Google. And there's actually some good books out there. um, Introduction to Mountaineering. There's one called Freedom of the Hills, and there's another one by Uphill Athlete. So those are some good books about just getting into the sport. Um, but the bottom line is, please learn these skills,
Mhm.
prepare yourself, and as much as possible, don't be out there alone. I always have a buddy or a guide, or things can happen. So it's a sport that is truly enjoyable, but it could be risky,
Yeah.
and there's no shame in like turning around. There's no shame in knowing that this is the limit of your ability. It's okay. Again, come back, learn, improve, do it again. But start with, you know, get trained. Don't
Yeah.
just. It's not like running. Like I think a lot of people, like you can start running and maybe you get like a little bit of injury. You just sit at home for a while. You talk to your friends. But mountaineering is slightly different. Like the reward is higher, but the risk is higher too.
Hmm. Hmm. Yep. And you
But
got to
it's doable.
respect. Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And you recently, were on a adventure on a trip to Denali, right? Was
Hmm.
that your first? Was that your first attempt at a 20,000 feet
No,
peak?
actually, um, I actually climbed this peak in Nepal. That was my first 20,000 peak. It's called Labuche,
Hmm.
and I did that as a combination with my Everest Base Camp trek.
Okay.
So I went to Everest Base Camp with a few friends. Some of them were going for their Everest summit attempt. Some of them were just going to do the trek and come back. So I was going to do the trek, and then we were going to do one or two peaks. So we did this peak. It's called Labuche. It's just over 20,000 feet, and did that. And there was a mixture of skills there. It's funny, in Nepal they call it a trekking peak. It's not trekking peak. You're using skills beyond trekking. You're on a fixed rope. You're wearing crampons. You have boots. You have cold weather gear. So that was my first exposure into 20,000 feet. And
Okay.
then after that, since then I've been to Argentina and I climbed Aconcagua, and
Hmm.
Aconcagua is about 23,000 feet, and that was just before the pandemic started, and that was great. I had a great time there. It's it's got less of technical skills, but it's got other kinds of challenges. One, it's a high altitude peak. It's 23,000 feet is is high, and it's cold, and it can be very like dusty and windy. So
Hmm.
it's still you still have to be in a mindset of being out there for about 3 weeks or so, because the route that I did, it's called the Polish Traverse, the Polish Glacier Traverse, which is around the mountain, but just a tiny bit longer. And yeah, so that started my project, which I would love to do in the next like five or so years. And then the next one was Denali for me.
Hmm.
I was just there in end of June, early July, and after making it to Camp 3 and being stuck in bad weather there for about 7 days, we had to turn around because we had our up down day. And up down day is basically, if you have a good window, you're going up. If you have a bad window, you're going down.
Hmm.
Because you only carry that much food. And based on what kind of weather systems are moving in, from a safety perspective, you have to make that call. So we ran out of time and we had to turn around. So there was no summit, but it was a great experience for me. And I learned a few things. I could probably improve my training a little bit. Um, and yeah, I'm looking forward to trying it again. Hopefully next year,
Hmm.
if things work out. But and with me, there was this couple who I met in Aconcagua. That was their second time, and the first time that they were at Denali, they were stuck in the same location for 9 days. This time they were stuck for 7 days.
Oh.
So I've heard this pretty frequently about Denali, is that you 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 are at the mercy of the weather over there,
Hmm.
and so yeah, I feel pretty good about it, because I think I learned a lot of things that I can apply next time. Now, of course, a summit would have been great, but I'll be back again.
Yeah.
I made some new friends, and it was great.
Yeah. And then, of course, the granddaddy of all mountains that's on your T-shirt there. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, in fact, this T-shirt is something that I made. to celebrate like two objectives. One was, it's called Everesting, and
Mm.
Everesting is an activity that actually found its origins in cycling, where you climb the same hill over and over until you get to the altitude or the height of Mount Everest, which is 8848. Now, there's some websites that claim 8850, but so, and a lot of people have gone from cycling to doing that on foot. So
Mhm.
I recently Everested on foot, which basically means there's a peak nearby. It's called Mission Peak. I climbed that just over 13 times to get to about 29,000 feet, 29, 29. And it took me about 38 hours. So I created this T-shirt to celebrate that and to inspire people. And then of course, at some point in this project of 7 summits, Everest is on the list because it's the high point of Asia. So
Mm.
so that's on my radar. I originally wanted to do it this year, but then the pandemic happened. I'm happy that I didn't go because a friend of mine was at Everest this year, and she was telling me that COVID was widespread over there and all these stories. And I don't know if next year is going to be any better. Um, Hopefully it is, because it's useful and helpful for the economy there. But I would say in the next 2 to 3 years is if things line up, I'm looking forward to trying my hand and hopefully make it there.
Amazing. Beautiful, Saurabh. That's such a perfect progression to your endurance journey, right? It almost seems like something about mountaineering is there's an allure to it. There's a mystery to it, and also it doesn't seem like you can just get it done even if you're the fittest person. There's a weather element. The mountain has to agree to let itself be
Mhm.
seen, right? It's very mystical in that sense. It's beautiful in a way, right?
You have to be patient. Um,
Mm,
you have to, I think people will, there's all the factors, but you have to be patient, and it's an activity that requires commitment at a different level, in the sense
mm,
that you need to stay engaged and you want the same thing for years.
mm,
Like for example, a marathon. People can say I'm in a 6 month training plan, or something like that. Like the horizon is very different than a mountaineering project. So for
mm,
me, I because I like it, it's easy for me to stay excited about it for 5 years, 10 years.
mhm,
Like that's the scale. And at the end of the day, like, what I think is kind of like the underline here is that it's how you live your life
mm,
is just going to be something that you're going to be excited about. Like, for example, my dad, he's 71. He just ran an ultra 24-hour track run like yesterday.
mm.
So for him, it's the same deal, right? This is how he lives. So that's the thing, is like, this, you have to decide how you want to live, and then you will stay engaged, you will stay focused.
Hey, that answers my first question. Initially, I asked you, somebody inspired you. Looks like it's your dad. It seems like it.
He he actually started after I did, but he
Okay.
certainly inspires me. He started when he was 65,
Wow.
after like uh, being a great dad for like 20, 30 years, and he wanted to do things differently. So he started around 65, I think, and he's 71 now, and he's done all kinds of ultra distances. So, but yeah, he does inspire me and many folks.
Amazing. Beautiful. Beautiful. Sounds good. Saurabh, thanks. I think we covered a fair amount of ground with regards to your journey. Obviously, your journey is worth a book. There's so much you've done, uh, and there's so many domains that you explore. What's so fascinating and is about you keep using the word curious. Um,
Hmm.
I think it's a growth mindset. It's an ability to keep looking at new things, exploring new things. Is always in a you're an explorer, in that sense.
An
uh,
explorer with a lot of tools and technology and comfort, I would say.
yeah, that's
It's
true.
it's nothing. It's nothing like what. what exploration meant in the early 1900s,
Yeah.
because that's I've been reading a lot of books about first ascents. So the first
Mm.
ascent of course, Everest and other places like Annapurna, Kanchenjunga, etc. And when you read those stories, like I think those people are explorers. What we still keep that alive
Yeah.
by challenging ourselves. So
Yeah.
you know I'll take that compliment, but with the sense that you know it's exploration to me. It's like
Yeah.
what's new to me. Like that, I think is what's exciting to me.
Yeah. Oh, an urban explorer. Look, you got a day job, you got a family. It's not like you do this full time, but keeping that alive.
I wish I did.
That's alrighty. Okay, so moving on
Hmm.
to a slightly lighter conversation here. I have a fun Q and
Hmm.
A round that I have for my guests. So,
Okay,
you ready for that?
let's do it.
So, the first one I have: what's your favorite post-race guilty pleasure, or a post-endurance guilty pleasure?
Some kind of good food, I would say.
So, more specifically, what's your favorite junk food?
Ah, I like chips in general,
Hmm.
like potato chips. It's probably the worst kind of junk food.
All right, chips it is. So, when you're not busy planning all these big endurance events, what do you like to do?
Yeah, like just what else do I do
Yeah,
with my time? Yeah,
yeah. What do you like to do to unwind when you're not busy planning these big projects?
I think my wife calls me the most active lazy person ever, which means like when I'm active and I'm active. Otherwise, I'm just like sitting at home and enjoying my couch. But I think I like to think about what else I could be doing.
Hmm.
I also love to spend time with my son as he grows older.
Hmm.
For example, doing things with him,
Hmm.
and I think I see myself doing more with him because he's about 9.5 now. So
Hmm.
he's tried his hand at like a kids triathlon. He's done some hiking
Hmm.
with me. He's generally like an active kid now. He's talked about he wants to do some rock climbing, so I'll probably take him with me to a rock climbing gym. And so I think I want to do a little bit more of that
Yeah.
moving forward. I always pretend to be a reader, so I want to read more. Um, but but I think I do better with audiobooks. So
Hmm.
I'm a listener, and my secret there is I listen to books at 1.7 speed, and that works out really well.
Okay. You have now three generations of folks who are pursuing endurance in your family, so you can have three generations do an event. That'd be awesome. All right. And I have a last question, which I always, which is my favorite question, is a play question with my guests. Is if we made a movie of you and your life,
Uh-huh.
what genre would you put it in, and who would you
Okay.
like it? Who would you like to play your character in the movie?
Oh, it probably has to be science fiction or comedy.
Okay.
It's a hard one to figure out which one. Probably about science fiction because that's just something that I love. Um, so it would be science fiction. I don't know. I don't know who I would want uh, to be the person to play me. I don't know. I would probably pick somebody from an action movie to play me. Um, yeah, I think the people that play science fiction roles are maybe too nerdy. uh, so I don't really know the answer to that. Um, somebody from an action genre. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that one.
Da-
Who do you prefer? What do you think?
let's have Daniel Craig play you, the guy who plays James Bond.
Okay, sure, sure. Yeah, okay.
Let's go with that.
Let's go with that.
Let's go with that.
That's a good one, actually. Yeah, yeah. I
In
mean, I'd
science
look like
fiction, you probably meet a alien life form when you're in Everest.
that would
That's the
that would
storyline.
man.
And what
I think I
happens?
won't. I want to be as calm as possible when I'm there, so I'm not scared away and fall off. But I think that could be a good plot, like and maybe it's to do with hallucination, and you're hallucinating about an alien because you're so tired.
There's this theory going around that we are living in a simulation, right? And so the script of your movie is going to be that when you reach Everest, the alien life form comes to you and says, "Well done, but this was all a simulation."
Oh, maybe I would be disappointed, but I think that is interesting. Yeah, like talking about one of my all-time favorite movies is Interstellar. I don't know if you've seen that one,
Mhm, mhm,
and like it's something to do with like outer space and
mhm.
exploration. Since you mentioned that earlier, I like that aspect of
Yeah, yeah,
just discovering new things and finding out new things. So that's kind of why I love science fiction in general, where
yeah,
it's all about like some dude's imagination that you're watching on a big screen, right? Or
yeah,
some lady's imagination. And I just love that, right? I just
yeah.
love how creative people are, how imaginative people are. That's why I love that genre. Like, I think,
Absolutely, Saurabh. The way your life is projecting, I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to be submitting some peak in Mars or Moon soon. That's the way humanity is projecting anyway. So
maybe not in my lifetime, but I think, in future generations,
you never know. Yeah,
getting to another planet is maybe likely.
yeah. Amazing, beautiful. So Saurabh, we kind of you did well on the Q&A round. We learned a few more things about you. Um,
Do I get a Karan Johar style hamper or something?
Hamper, yeah, I'm still working on that.
Okay, you
Still
can mail
working
it to
on
me
that.
later.
Yeah, working on sponsorships for that.
Okay, we'll call Daniel Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, coming to end of this conversation, very fascinating. Again, with someone like you who's so multifaceted, doing so many things, it's always sometimes difficult to get everything out in just an hour and a half or so.
Mhm.
But thanks for sharing, your journey here. And uh, before we wrap up, I'll let you have the last word. Anything you want to say to the audience before we close the show?
Yeah, I want to say thanks. Thank you for having me here, and of course, thank you for having many others here because I had a chance to listen to a few episodes that you have put together in the past, and some of them are my friends from the Bay Area. So it's been a pleasure, and I think what I'll leave people with is I think how I have kind of been able to succinctly summarize things is grit and passion, and I think those are the two things that you put together, and you can do things, and I'll just leave it there.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thanks, Saurabh. I'll let you go and have you enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and we shall stay in touch.
All right, thanks. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.